Oh, oh, hey. Hey, I didn't see you guys there. How long you been there? How's it going? Chapter 33, Circulation, Part 1. So, what is the circulatory system? Well, the circulatory system consists of your heart, your veins, your arteries, and we could even say your lungs. So, the circulatory system, what's the point of all this? All right, so it's the highways of your body. In other words, when your small intestine absorbs food, how's it going to get that food to your cells? Well, it's going to put it in your bloodstream, and your blood's going to flow through your body, and it's going to deliver the food. When your lungs breathe in oxygen, how is it going to deliver that oxygen to your little toe? Well, it puts the oxygen in your bloodstream, your heart pumps it around and delivers oxygen to your little toe. So you can see that the circulatory system requires blood. So blood is the fluid that's inside this system, and it's what's carrying the nutrients and oxygen. The heart is the pump that's moving the blood around, and the lungs is a part of this too, because it's the lungs that are absorbing oxygen from the air around you. And in fact, the whole point of this system, and maybe its most important role, is blink, blink, 24/7 oxygen delivery. In other words, all of the cells in your body need oxygen all the time, constantly. They can't go without it. And the reason for that is they need oxygen to serve as the terminal electron acceptor at the base of the electron transport chain, which is just fancy talk for aerobic respiration. You need ATP, so you got to deliver oxygen to all your cells. Hence, your circulatory system never stops. That's why your heart can't stop beating, you can't stop breathing for very long, and then you're dead. Okay, that was pretty dramatic. Here's a bunch of different things. We're not really going to talk about most of those. All right, so I mentioned that your heart and lungs are important. So here's what your heart looks like. It's not in the shape of that cartoon heart you drew for your sweetheart in third grade. It looks kind of more like a lump, like a misshapen lump. It's in the middle of your chest, and yeah, it's a little bit to the left, but it's nestled right in between your lungs. And your lungs and your heart are actually connected. They're plugged in together by veins and arteries. We'll talk about that more as we go. All right, so basically the upper part of your chest, the upper part of your torso, basically above your liver and below your neck is really just heart and lungs for the most part. All right, we're going to talk about different parts of the heart, but here is, well, here's a picture of a heart. See, look how gross that is. Here's a diagram of a heart that's been sliced in half, and you see that there's some big veins that are plugged into it in different sections, right? It looks pretty complicated. It kind of looks like a car engine maybe, right? And so we're gonna work through how these different veins and arteries work in conjunction with the heart. But in this picture, I want you to see if you can figure out the four main chambers of the heart. So your heart has four chambers, and here's one. This is the right atrium. Here's another one. This is the right ventricle. Here's another one, the left atrium, and another one is the left ventricle. So a couple of things. One, why in the world are we calling this the right atrium? The reason is we're pretending like we're looking at this person's heart. So this is their right arm. So this is the right side of their heart. This is their left arm. So this is the left side of their heart. So it's the same thing here where it's like a flipped image, like when you take a selfie. You also notice that the chambers on top, each of them is called an atrium, and the chambers on the bottom, each of them is called a ventricle. Okay, so right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Just remember that moving forward. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the human circulatory system in more detail. A bunch of confusing graphs. Here we are. Here's the heart, right? You see the four chambers, right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. And now it's starting to show how some of the plumbing works. So, and I'm going to go over this multiple times, but just as an overview. So here's your body. It's like your legs, kind of weird. This is representing the lower part of your body. So the cells in your legs are pulling oxygen out of your blood. So the oxygen in the cells need to get replenished with new oxygen, so that oxygen-free blood, which is just represented by the color blue, right? That oxygen-free blood flows back to your heart. It enters the right atrium, goes to the right ventricle, then it gets pumped out of your heart. Now, where in the world would this blood go? That's right, it's going to go to the lungs because it's blue, therefore it's lacking oxygen. So the blood gets pumped to your left lobe of your lung and to your right lobe, and you breathe in, and it puts oxygen back in the blood, turning it red. Right? Now we need to get this oxygen-rich blood to the rest of your body, so it flows back into the left atrium, and then the left ventricle, and then it goes out of your heart, and then it splits, and some of it returns to your lower body delivering oxygen, and some of it goes up to your upper body and your brain delivering oxygen. Right? So there you go. That's the big picture. This is the picture from your book. It makes it look like plumbing in a house. I just don't like it. This one was better. All right, so we can say that there's two circuits. So let me go back. So we've got one circuit here that is body to heart. Right. See what I'm doing with the mouse here, with the cursor? And then there's another circuit that's lungs to heart and back again. So the heart to lungs circuit is called the pulmonary circuit, and the body to heart circuit is called the systemic circuit. The point is there's two circuits. All right. So this is, for example, this is just showing the pulmonary circuit. So blood leaves the heart, it goes to the two lobes of the lung, gets full of oxygen, and then goes back to the heart. That's the pulmonary circuit. The systemic circuit would be the same thing, just instead of the lungs, we would have the body. And yeah. All right. So this is pictures from your book. This is showing how the blood flows through the heart. I would like you to know this, right? Obviously, that's why I'm teaching you this. That's why I'm bringing it up in this video. But your goal for your life, 5 minutes from this point, should be for you to understand how blood flows through your body and especially through your heart. All right, so I'm going to talk about the same thing a couple times using a couple different slides. So let's start here. Number one. So the atria, the right atrium and the left atrium, fill with blood, right? So this one's filling with deoxygenized blood from your body. This one's filling with oxygenized blood that's been pumped here from the lungs, right? Step two, the atria contract and they squeeze the blood out. So the blood leaves the right atrium and goes into the right ventricle. The blood at the same time is squeezed and leaves the left atrium and goes into the left ventricle. Step three, the ventricles contract, squeezing the blood out. And so the blood in the right ventricle, which is deoxygenated, so where do we need to send it? It gets pumped out of the heart and it goes to the lungs. The left ventricle contracts and it sends the blood out of the heart. And by the way, this is oxygenated blood that came here from the lungs. So the left ventricle contracts and squeezes the blood out of the heart and throughout the body, delivering oxygen. How we doing? Yeah? Here's a big dramatic picture of the heart, and I want to try to teach you the same thing as that last slide, but add a little animation because I'm good at that. So let's begin by just tracking blood. All right. So I've got blue arrows representing blood that's deoxygenated. So it's going to enter, once again, it enters the right atrium. So it's doing that through two huge veins. This is a vein that's draining deoxygenated blood from the upper part of your body, like your head. And then this vein is draining deoxygenated blood from the rest of your body, from basically below the neck down, right? So the right atrium fills with deoxygenated blood, and then the atria are going to contract. And when we pump the blood out of the atrium, where's it going to go? Really, there's just one place. It would be silly if it just went back into the vein it came in, so that can't be right. So when the atrium contracts, it's got to be pumping the blood to the right ventricle. Hey, I got it right. So the right ventricle fills with deoxygenated blood. And then when it contracts, where do you think the blood's going to go? Well, it's going to go out this big. This is called the pulmonary artery. And the blood's going to go out of this, and it's going to leave the heart, And where's it going to go? Well, it's deoxygenated. The heart must be pumping it through to the lungs. That's right. So it goes to the lungs, and there in the lungs, it gets full of oxygen. Now we need to get that oxygen-rich blood from the lungs to the rest of the body, but we need to do that by first sending it back to the heart. So the blood, oxygen-rich blood, leaves the lungs and comes back to the heart through veins over here and over here. I had to make this arrow all dramatic just so you could see. The point is the oxygenated blood is showing up in the left atrium, right? The left atrium is going to contract, and where in the world is it going to send that oxygenated blood? You got it. The left ventricle. When the left ventricle contracts, where is this oxygenated blood going to go? Yeah, right here, through this huge artery called the aorta. And then once it starts leaving, so it leaves the heart and it gets in the aorta, and then the aorta branches and it sends blood to your left arm and your right arm and your left leg and your right leg and your brain and all that good stuff. And then the blood gets deoxygenated because the cells are pulling out the oxygen to feed the mitochondria. And then the blood will return to your heart and we do the whole thing over again. So your blood is constantly getting cycled through in that pattern. Any questions? No questions? Okay. Well, let's keep going. I wanted to point out that I made it sound like this pumps and then this pumps and then this pumps and then this pumps. But really, since blood is flowing through the heart the whole time, what happens is your heart is pretty smart and the atria contract together. So this right atrium and the left atrium, they both contract at the same time, sending blood to the ventricles, and then the ventricles contract, sending the blood out. And then guess what happens? And then the atria contract, and then the ventricles, and then the atria and the ventricles, and then the atria and the ventricles. You get the point. So your heart actually has two contractions. The first one is the atria contracting. The second one is the ventricles contracting. And this should make sense because if I asked you to make the sound of a heart beating, you would probably make a sound like this. Right? That was pretty good. That was my heart, actually. Not really. That was just me with my vocal cords. So you can hear that there's two beats. There's a ba-bump, ba-bump. And you can hear that the second beat is a little bit more forceful. Okay, that's my hint. Which of these two contractions is going to be more powerful? The atria contracting or the ventricles contracting? Which one would you want to put a little more oomph into it? What's that? No, sorry. Yeah, that's the wrong answer, Frankie. Try again. Oh, good. So the atria contracting is the weaker of the two because look, when the atria contracts, right, they're going to, let me go back. When the atria contract, they're just moving the blood here to the ventricle. But when the ventricles contract, they're moving the blood out of the heart and through the lungs and through the body. So I don't know why I went back to this slide. So my point is the heart beats in two beats, ba, bump. The ba is the atria, the bump is the ventricles. The ventricles contracting is more powerful because they're moving the blood much further distances. So they need to generate more pressure. And by the way, that makes sense too. Let's go back. I'm sorry to go way back here. Remember this? Do you see a ton of muscle around the atria? No, not really. Do you see all this muscle around the ventricles? Yeah, bro, I do. Right? So that shows you the ventricles are really strong. Now, which of the two ventricles has the most muscle? The right one or the left one? It's the left one. Look how much stronger this left ventricle is compared to the right ventricle. Why would that be? Because the left ventricle has more work to do. It has to pump the blood out of the heart and through the entire body, whereas the right ventricle just needs to pump the blood out of the heart and through your lungs, which is so easy compared to the entire body. So this is why your heart looks kind of lopsided. The left side is bigger because the muscle needs to be stronger for pumping the blood through the entire body. Okay. All right, your heartbeats are coordinated by something called the SA node. So it's basically just a nerve that sends out signals to all of the four chambers of the heart and keeps it coordinated. So there's nerves in your heart, and the SA node basically says, all right, you beat, no, you beat, now you beat. And so sometimes the SA node is called the cardiac pacemaker because it's this set of nerves that's basically controlling the rhythm of the heart. What's interesting is this node will keep communicating and the heart will keep beating even if you rip the heart out of someone's chest. Literally, not metaphorically. So a heart can beat in someone's hand. I think I've talked about this before in this class. But the heart will continue to beat until it runs out of ATP. If someone's having a heart attack, sometimes what's going on is their heart might be beating, but it's not doing it in a coordinated fashion, so it's not actually moving blood through their body. So how do you fix that? Well, one way is you get these fancy paddles and you rub them together like in the TV shows, and then you put it on the chest, and then you say clear, and then you hit a button and it zaps them with electricity. So that electricity basically resets the SA node and it gets the heart to start beating rhythmically again. That's called a defibrillator. Defibrillator. All right. I hope that makes sense. I have no idea. I can't read your faces. I don't know if you're even listening right now. Maybe I don't know what you're doing. All right. So that's the human circulatory system. But let's backtrack a little bit and kind of broaden our perspective. What are some other types of circulatory systems? Well, not everyone has one like I just talked about. So some animals have an open circulatory system. So look at this grasshopper. There's a picture of the grasshopper. Here's the grasshopper sliced in half, and here's a representation of its circulatory system. So basically, it's got it's kind of a heart. We call it a heart, but it's just like a part of its artery that has muscles. Okay, whatever. So it's a pump, right? And it pumps the blood this way, right, towards its brain. And then the blood comes out of the arteries, and then the blood just washes around, sloshes around in its body. And then this end of the circulatory system sucks some of that blood up, and then it gets pumped back to the brain. So this is an open circulatory system. It's open on both ends. So it's kind of like a tube with a pump in the middle of it. Right? So this is kind of like, well, I don't have a good analogy for you. Closed circulatory systems are closed. So this is the closed circulatory system of an earthworm. The blood doesn't leave it. So the blood gets pumped towards the head, and then it goes to little capillaries, and then it comes back. Right? And so the blood isn't like being pumped in and out of the system. Okay, you understand what I'm saying. Here's a fish circulatory system. So the heart pumps deoxygenated blood to not the lungs, because fish don't have lungs. They have gills. So the gills fill the blood up with oxygen, and then the oxygenated blood gets pumped throughout the body, and then the cells take the oxygen out, and then the deoxygenated blood goes back to the heart. Now, what do you notice about the fish heart? That's right, it only has two chambers, so it has one atrium and one ventricle, and that's it. And there's only one circuit. So the blood they're pumping through their gills that's on the same circuit as the rest of their body. Remember I said we have two circuits, the pulmonary or lungs, and then the systemic or body. Well, fish only have one circuit. All right, here's an amphibian. So imagine a frog. So now they have two circuits. So they've got the system with the lungs and the system with the rest of the body, but they only have one ventricle. So deoxygenated blood comes into the right atrium, and then it goes into the ventricle. And then when the ventricle contracts, some of the blood goes to the lungs and back to the heart, but some of the blood goes out to the rest of the body. Right? Now, why is that a big deal? Well, you can see here in the ventricle is receiving deoxygenated blood from the body and oxygenated blood from the lungs. So some of this blood that gets pumped out, if it might be deoxygenated blood that gets pumped out to the body, or it could be oxygenated blood that gets pumped to the lungs. So in other words, only having one ventricle is kind of messy. Right? And you might be wasting everybody's time pumping oxygenated blood to the lungs or pumping deoxygenated blood to the body. So why would a frog be a terrible long distance runner? because he's only got one ventricle. All right, but birds and mammals are awesome. We have 4 chambers, so there's no mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So the deoxygenated blood all goes to the lungs, and then the oxygenated blood all goes to the rest of the body. So who's good at flying long distances, running marathons, sprinting after antelope? Birds and mammals, because we have 4-chambered hearts. That's all I got. It's over. Part 2 coming up.